My name is Grace Anderson. My daughter lied that she was an orphan to get into a rich family. Trust me, you'll regret skipping this story. So before you sit back and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Grace's Truth. Now get in the mood to listen to this story because it might be the ultimate sweet revenge. I always believed I knew my daughter, every laugh, every tear, every secret whispered in the dark. But sometimes the people closest to you can hold the deepest betrayals. It began on a rainy afternoon, the kind where the sky feels heavy and suffocating, as if the world itself knows something terrible is about to happen. I was scrolling through my phone when a message popped up from a distant relative, someone I rarely spoke to. It was a link to an old newspaper article featuring my daughter Emily, but the headline caught my breath. Local orphan's dream comes true. Joins wealthy family. Orphan. That word hit me like a hammer. I blinked, reread it. Emily, an orphan. How could she hide that from me, her mother? I called her immediately, but she was already out with friends. The casual smile in her voice, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. I sat down in our cozy living room, the walls lined with photos of our family, each frame a frozen memory. There she was in those pictures, smiling at birthday parties, hugging me tight, telling me she loved me. And yet, here was this lie, bold and sharp as a knife. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every moment, every conversation, searching for clues I might have missed. How long had she been telling this lie, and why? The next morning, I confronted her softly, careful not to let anger poison the moment. Emily, I saw something yesterday. A story about you being an orphan. What's going on? Her eyes widened, then narrowed, and she said with a calm, I didn't recognize Mom. It's complicated. You wouldn't understand. But I did understand. I understood betrayal, confusion, and heartbreak. And I knew this was only the beginning. As days passed, I started noticing the cracked, subtle things Emily said that didn't add up, the way she avoided certain topics, and her distant phone calls. The daughter I thought I knew was slipping away, replaced by someone I barely recognized. I wasn't just losing my daughter to lies. I was losing the truth we once shared. And deep down, I feared what would happen if the rich family she had woven this web forever found out the real story. Because sometimes the cost of a lie is far greater than anyone imagines. Emily's facade was flawless. It was like watching a master actor perform on a stage. She had built herself one that masked every crack and hidden motive. When she entered the world of the wealthy family she had married into, she transformed completely. Gone was the girl I thought I knew, replaced by a woman who could captivate any room with her effortless charm and practiced grace. For months, I watched her play the part of the perfect daughter-in-law. She attended lavish parties with ease, laughed at the right moments, and showed an uncanny ability to make everyone feel important. Her new in-laws adored her. Her husband looked at her with a mix of pride and love that seemed untouchable. And me, I was left behind, watching from the sidelines, feeling like an outsider in my own daughter's life. But the most painful part was the subtle ways she distanced herself from me. Calls grew shorter. Visits became less frequent. Even her tone when she spoke to me changed, colder, more guarded. I started to realize that the person I thought was my daughter was becoming a stranger. She was no longer the girl who shared secrets over late-night talks or cried on my shoulder when things got tough. Now she was someone living a double life. The lie about being an orphan was the keystone of this new identity she had crafted. It wasn't just a small fabrication, it was a complete reinvention that severed her ties to her past, including to me. She had erased the very people who had shaped her childhood, who had loved her unconditionally, simply to fit into a world where money and status mattered more than blood. I began to question everything I thought I knew about her. How much of our past had been genuine? Had she always planned this deception? Or was it a desperate act, born out of a longing to escape a life she found unbearable? These questions haunted me every day. One afternoon, I sat in the quiet of my home staring at a photo of Emily from her wedding day. She was radiant, glowing with happiness and hope. Yet beneath that smile, I could sense the heavy burden she carried, the weight of the secret she was hiding. It broke my heart to think that she felt the need to push me away to rewrite her history just to survive. I reached out to some old friends and family members, hoping to piece together the truth. What I learned only deepened my pain. Whispers of her carefully constructed stories, inconsistencies in what she told me, and rumors that she had manipulated those around her to protect her fabricated identity. Each revelation was like a knife twisting in my chest. But despite the betrayal, I still loved her. I still wanted to understand why she did what she did. I knew the path ahead would be difficult, full of confrontations, heartbreak, and maybe even forgiveness. But one thing was certain: I could no longer pretend that everything was okay. The daughter I raised, who once dreamed of a simple, honest life, had become someone I barely recognized. And the question that haunted me most was whether I could ever find my way back to her, or if the lies would keep us forever apart. Whispers reached me first, small, almost insignificant comments passed between relatives, neighbors, even acquaintances. At first, I brushed them aside as idle gossip, but then the hints became harder to ignore. Someone mentioned a conversation overheard at a family gathering. Another recalled an old friend of Emily's expressing doubts about her story. The cracks in her perfect facade were growing. It was a cruel kind of pain to hear others speak of my daughter's deception in hushed tones, as if she were some stranger hiding behind a mask. Each whisper felt like a betrayal, not just from Emily, but from the world that seemed eager to tear her down. Yet beneath the hurt, a fierce protectiveness flared in me. I needed to uncover the truth, not just for me, but for Emily too. I started reaching out cautiously at first to people who might know more. An old teacher, a childhood friend, distant cousins. Their stories didn't always align, but a pattern emerged. Emily had rewritten her past, not just about being an orphan, but about where she came from, who she belonged to. The truth was tangled in layers of omission and lies. One afternoon, I met with Mrs. Harper, a woman who had known Emily when she was just a child. Over coffee, she shared memories of a bright, curious girl, but also of a family struggling with hardships far from the glamorous life Emily now portrayed. She was desperate to escape, Mrs. Harper said softly, but I never imagined she would go this far. Hearing these words stung but also gave me clarity. Emily's lies were born from pain, from a need to protect herself. It didn't excuse what she'd done, but it helped me understand. Still, the whispers kept coming, and with them the fear that the rich family Emily had married into might one day discover the truth. The thought terrified me. What would happen then? Would they reject her? Would her husband turn away? The stakes were high, and I felt powerless to stop the inevitable. That night, I sat alone in my room, the weight of the secret pressing down on me. I realized that this wasn't just about Emily anymore. It was about the fragile bonds of trust, the painful cost of deception, and the question of how far someone will go to rewrite their story. The whispers weren't just voices from the outside world. They were echoes of the doubts growing inside me. And I knew that soon I would have to face Emily again, to confront the lies, the silence, and the heartbreak. Because sometimes the hardest truths come not from strangers, but from those we love most. But the complexity of Emily's lie didn't stop there. It wasn't a simple story of orphanhood. She had crafted an entire background, a history she buried deep beneath layers of carefully chosen words. She erased siblings, erased family ties, erased every connection that could reveal the life she left behind. It was as if she wanted to create a new identity, born not from pain, but from ambition. In speaking with those from her past, I learned that Emily's childhood had been far from perfect. There had been hardships, yes, financial struggles, misunderstandings, even neglect. But she wasn't alone. She had family, a mother who loved her fiercely. That was me, a brother who'd always looked out for her. None of that mattered in her new story. In her version, she was an orphan, alone and vulnerable, deserving of the wealthy family's sympathy and love. The realization hit me harder than I expected. She wasn't just lying to them, she was lying to herself. Had she truly convinced herself of this new identity, or was it a calculated move born from years of simmering resentment, disappointment, and the desperate hope for a better life? I wrestled with these thoughts constantly. Could I hate her for it? Could I forgive her? Or was I just fooling myself by clinging to the hope that the daughter I raised still existed beneath this web of deceit? Meanwhile, the wealthy family seemed blissfully unaware. Emily had woven her lie so seamlessly that no one questioned her past. The lavish parties, the elegant dinners, the polished smiles, all were part of the act. And yet I feared the day the truth might spill out. I thought about confronting her, but the fear of destroying what little relationship we had left stopped me. Would telling her I knew shatter the fragile connection, or would silence only allow the lie to grow stronger, strangling what was left of our bond? One night, I found myself scrolling through photos on social media, searching for any clue, any sign of who Emily really was. There were pictures of her with her new family laughing happy carefree, but none showed the daughter I knew, the one who used to run to me with scraped knees or whispered fears. It was like she'd erased that girl entirely. That emptiness was suffocating, and yet despite everything I refused to give up on her. I held on to the hope that beneath the lies, beneath the carefully crafted facade, my daughter was still there, waiting for a chance to come home to the truth to me. The whispers, the pain, the uncertainty, they were all part of a storm that I knew I couldn't weather alone, but I had to be strong. For her. For myself. Because some stories aren't just about betrayal or lies, they're about the search for redemption, for understanding, and the possibility of healing. After days of restless nights and heartache swirling inside me like a storm, I realized I couldn't stay silent any longer. The lies my daughter Emily spun about her identity had become a chasm between us, an abyss growing wider with every passing day. I knew I had to confront her not with fury, but with a fragile hope that honesty might still salvage what was left of our fractured bond. I still remember the evening vividly. The sky had darkened, casting shadows over the city as I made my way to her apartment. My heart pounded with a mix of dread and determination. I knew this conversation could break us, or maybe begin to heal the wounds that had festered in silence for too long. The moment I stepped into her home, a strange stillness settled over us. The apartment was neat, impeccably decorated, reflecting the life she'd built far from the past we shared. Emily looked up from the couch where she'd been scrolling on her phone. Her eyes, sharp and wary, met mine, a silent question hanging in the air. I took a seat across from her, my hands trembling slightly. "Emily, we need to talk," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Her gaze didn't waver, but I sensed the tension beneath her calm exterior. "About what, Mom?" I swallowed hard. "About the lies, about the story you've been telling, about being an orphan." Her expression didn't change, but I caught the slightest flicker of something behind her eyes, a mixture of defensiveness, pain, and exhaustion. "I want to understand why you did it," I continued gently. "Why you felt you had to erase your past, your family." For a long moment, silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Then she spoke, her voice steady, but cold. "You wouldn't understand. You never understood." Those words landed like a slap. I had spent years trying to be the mother she needed, loving, supportive, patient. But maybe I had been blind to her struggles, or worse, unable to see the depths of her pain. "Try me," I whispered, my voice cracking. Emily looked away, biting her lip as if fighting back tears. It wasn't just a lie. It was survival. A way out from a life I couldn't bear. Her confession shattered the fragile calm. You could have come to me, I said softly. We could have faced it together. No, she said firmly. You're part of the past I'm trying to escape. Her words pierced me. She was pushing me away, distancing herself from the mother who had loved her unconditionally, but I refused to let her go without a fight. Emily, running from your past doesn't erase it, I said. And it doesn't mean you have to lose me. I'm still here. All of me, for all of you. Tears welled in her eyes, a crack forming in the wall she'd built so carefully. I'm scared, Mom, she admitted quietly. Scared you won't accept me if you know the real truth. I'm scared too, I replied. But I want to be here. Not just for the story you've told the world, but for the real you, the girl I raised. For a long time we sat in silence, the weight of unspoken pain hanging thick between us. The truth had been spoken, but the road ahead was uncertain. Healing would require more than words. It would take time, courage, and a willingness to face the wounds together. I realized then that confrontation wasn't about winning or losing. It was about opening a door, no matter how cracked or crooked, and hoping the light of truth might seep through. In the days that followed, I tried to bridge the gap carefully. I sent messages, called her sometimes, hoping she'd respond. But often I met silence or polite distance. Yet amidst the pain, I found small signs of connection, a hesitant text, a brief phone call, moments when her guard slipped, and I glimpsed the daughter I remembered. It was clear she was fighting her own battle. The weight of her lies, the fear of rejection, and the reality of living a double life pressed heavily on her shoulders. One afternoon, I received an unexpected call from her husband, Mark. His voice was cautious but kind. Grace, I know things are complicated, but I want you to know I'm here if you ever want to talk. His words surprised me, a reminder that Emily's new family wasn't just a fortress built on deception. There were real people in her life struggling alongside her. That conversation gave me a glimmer of hope. Maybe despite everything we could find a way forward. But the path wouldn't be easy. Because beneath the polished surface of Emily's new life lay a fragile truth, one that could shatter everything if revealed too soon. I often wondered if she felt trapped by the lie she created. Did she long to be free, or was she terrified of losing everything she had gained? The tension between truth and survival was a tightrope she walked every day, and as her mother, I was torn between wanting to protect her and wanting to expose the truth for the sake of healing. In those quiet moments, I prayed for strength for both of us, because sometimes the most painful conversations are the ones that open the door to redemption. The morning light filtered softly through the curtains when I realized that confrontation was only the beginning of a much darker and more painful chapter. After our fraught conversation, Emily's response was not relief or reconciliation. It was cold denial and distance. She refused to admit any wrongdoing and acted as though I was the one inventing conflict where none existed. Mom, I don't know what you're talking about. She said, her voice sharp but tinged with hurt. I've told you everything there is to tell. Why are you making this so difficult? Her words hit me like a sudden storm, disorienting and painful. I had hoped that admitting her secret even indirectly would open the door to honesty. Instead, it slammed shut with the force of her rejection. Days turned into weeks, and the tension between us thickened. Every attempt to discuss the matter ended with silence or bitter arguments. Friends and family started noticing the growing divide, but Emily insisted all was well, presenting the same flawless image she showed the wealthy family. Her denial wasn't just a defense mechanism, it was a weapon. She wielded it carefully to silence me and to maintain control over the narrative, her narrative. Behind closed doors, however, the strain was evident. I watched the fatigue in her eyes, the way she flinched when certain topics came up, the subtle cracks in her carefully maintained mask. I knew she was hurting, but her pride and fear kept her from facing it. One evening, after a particularly tense phone call, I found myself alone, tears streaming down my cheeks. The daughter I had raised was slipping away, replaced by someone I barely recognized, and I felt powerless to stop it. But even as she pushed me away, I refused to give up. I knew that beneath her cold denials was a scared, vulnerable girl desperate to be loved and accepted not for the lies she told, but for the truth she buried. Determined to find the truth for myself, I began gathering evidence. I sought out old documents, records, and testimonies that could prove or disprove her story. I contacted people from her past, teachers, neighbors, distant relatives, anyone who might shed light on the life she had hidden. It was a painstaking process filled with disappointment and unexpected revelations. Some accounts confirmed the hardships Emily claimed to have endured. Others exposed inconsistencies and half-truths that painted a more complicated picture. Through it all, I learned that Emily's deception wasn't born out of simple greed or malice. It was a tangled web of fear, shame, and longing for a better life. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that her lie about being an orphan was only the tip of the iceberg. There were deeper wounds beneath the surface wounds that needed understanding and healing. With evidence in hand, I faced a new dilemma: what to do with it. Exposing Emily risked destroying the fragile relationships she had built and tearing apart the family we once were. But staying silent felt like betraying the truth and myself. In the end, I realized that the path forward would require more than proof. It would require compassion, patience, and a willingness to face the uncomfortable truths about who we were and who we wanted to become. As I prepared to confront Emily again, this time armed not just with questions but with understanding, I knew that the road ahead would be long and fraught with pain. But I also knew that it was the only way to find a way back to each other. Because sometimes the hardest battles are fought not with anger, but with love. Gathering evidence was like walking through a minefield. Every step had the potential to trigger a painful revelation or deepen the wounds between Emily and me. But I was determined not just to confirm the truth, but to understand the extent of the deception and hopefully find a way to heal. I started by sifting through old family documents, birth certificates, school records, hospital papers, pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit with the narrative Emily had constructed. Some documents were missing, others contradicted the story she told her new family. One afternoon, I visited the local courthouse to request records about Emily's adoption status, convinced that the orphan claim must be rooted in some official truth. But there was no adoption record. Emily was legally my daughter, not an orphan. The realization was bittersweet. The lie was even deeper than I feared. Next, I contacted old friends and neighbors from the neighborhood where Emily grew up. I approached Mrs. Jenkins, who had watched Emily play in the streets as a child. She recalled Emily's family, me, her father, and her older brother with warmth and fondness. "Your daughter's been through a lot, Grace," she said gently, "but she's never been alone." This was the truth Emily had erased. I spoke to Emily's childhood teacher, Mrs. Clark, who remembered Emily as bright but troubled. "She was a good kid, but there was always something weighing on her," she said. "She wanted to escape, I think." Every testimony painted a fuller picture of a girl caught between love and fear, truth and lies. Yet as I collected these stories, I also found evidence of manipulation. People mentioned how Emily would twist facts, omit details, and craft narratives that served her purpose. She had convinced her wealthy in-laws that she was an orphan deserving of their protection and care, while distancing herself from her real family. The deeper I dug, the more I realized that this was more than a simple lie. It was a betrayal that cut to the bone. With a folder full of documents and testimonies, I faced a difficult choice. Should I confront Emily with everything I had, or should I hold back, fearing it might shatter whatever fragile connection remained? I decided to wait, hoping to find the right moment, one where truth could come without destruction. In the meantime, the distance between Emily and me grew. She sensed my investigation, and her calls became fewer. The warmth in her voice vanished, replaced by cool civility. One day, a mutual friend warned me that Emily was spreading rumors about me, painting me as a jealous, bitter mother trying to ruin her new life. It was painful to hear, but I understood her fear. In her mind, I was the enemy threatening her carefully built world. Still, I held on to hope. I believed that beneath the lies and defenses, Emily was still my daughter, the girl who once clung to my hand and trusted me with her fears. I prepared myself for the inevitable confrontation. When the time came, I would lay everything on the table, the lies, the evidence, the pain, and hope that honesty would be the key to unlocking the door between us. Because sometimes the truth is a weapon, but it can also be a bridge, and I was ready to cross it no matter the cost. The moment I uncovered the full extent of Emily's deception, my world tilted. It wasn't just a hidden secret tucked away in the shadows. It was a vast, intricate web of lies designed to sever her ties from the family she once belonged to. A betrayal so deep, it threatened to dismantle everything I believed about our lives. That night, the house was silent except for the sound of my breathing and the rustling of papers. I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by the evidence I had painstakingly collected: photocopies of birth certificates, faded photographs, handwritten letters, and printed testimonies from people who had once been part of Emily's life. Each piece told a story that contradicted the narrative she'd woven for her new world, a narrative where she was an orphan alone, deserving of the sympathy and protection of her wealthy in-laws. I traced my fingers over an old photograph of Emily and her brother laughing in the backyard when they were children. That brother, the very one she had erased from her story. How could she dismiss a bond so real, so tangible? My heart ached with the knowledge that Emily had gone to great lengths not just to hide the truth, but to build a completely new identity that left her family behind. This wasn't just a small lie, it was a full erasure of her past. I wondered when the cracks in her story first appeared. Was it years ago when she started feeling the pressure to escape? Or was it more recent, a calculated step to secure a life she thought was out of reach? Questions tumbled through my mind like a relentless storm. What had driven her to such extremes? Was it shame, fear? A longing to belong somewhere she never felt she did before? Despite the pain, I reminded myself that beneath the layers of deception was still my daughter, a girl I had loved since the day she was born. And love meant I had to understand even when understanding hurt. The next day, I sat with Mark, Emily's husband. He was shocked when I shared some of the discoveries, his face pale but composed. "I had no idea," he said quietly. "Emily never spoke about her past like this." His words echoed the fragile truth of their marriage built on an illusion. Mark was torn. He loved Emily, but he feared the impact this revelation would have on his family and their social standing. I saw the weight of that burden in his eyes, a burden I too carried. Together we agreed on one thing: protecting Emily's dignity while seeking truth was paramount. But how I sought legal advice to understand what steps I could take without causing irreparable damage. The lawyer explained the risks of exposing the truth publicly: potential scandal, estrangement, and emotional devastation for all involved. At the same time, ignoring the deception could allow it to poison relationships further. It was a no-win scenario. The lawyer suggested mediation, a way for Emily and me to confront the past with a neutral third party. But even that required Emily's cooperation, which at this point was uncertain. Days turned into restless nights filled with worry. I replayed our last conversation in my mind, the way Emily's eyes hardened when I confronted her. "I did what I had to do," she had said, her voice a mix of resignation and defiance. "It wasn't easy, but it was the only way I saw out." Her words haunted me. What had I missed? What pain had driven her to such isolation? I reached out again, this time with an open heart and no accusations. "Emily, I want to help you. Not to punish you, but to heal." For the first time, she didn't push me away. Instead, there was a flicker of vulnerability, a crack in the wall she had built around herself. In that moment, I realized healing wouldn't come from anger or blame, but from patience and compassion. We would have to navigate this painful journey together, facing the truth with courage. There were many hard conversations ahead and perhaps many tears, but I held on to hope that our bond, fractured but not broken, could be mended. Because even the deepest betrayals can sometimes be healed with love. The days that followed our tentative truce were filled with an uneasy silence. Emily and I existed in the same spaces, but the walls between us still loomed large, heavy with unspoken fears and guarded emotions. Yet beneath the tension, a fragile thread of connection began to weave itself slowly, a cautious hope that truth and forgiveness might one day coexist. I realized that understanding her story meant looking beyond the lies to the wounds that fueled them. Emily's childhood hadn't been easy. Though she never spoke much about it, the fragments I uncovered told a tale of struggle, not the romanticized hardship she shared with her new family, but real pain, neglect, loneliness, and a desperate yearning for acceptance. In her world, pretending to be an orphan was a way to rewrite that pain, to craft a new identity where she was deserving, loved, and protected. It was a survival mechanism born of fear and isolation. One afternoon, I invited her to visit the old neighborhood, the place where her roots lay buried beneath years of silence. As we walked the familiar streets, memories flooded back. Some tender, others bitter. We passed the park where she had first learned to ride a bike, the corner store where she had bought her first ice cream, the schoolyard where laughter once echoed. Slowly, the past began to breathe again between us. She didn't speak much at first, but her eyes held stories I had never heard. I saw the weight she carried, the shame, the longing, and the hope for a fresh start. That visit marked a turning point. For the first time, Emily allowed herself to be vulnerable with me, to share fears she'd buried deep for so long. I was scared, she admitted one evening as we sat on the porch. Scared that if anyone knew the truth, I'd lose everything. My new life, my family, my future. I reached out, taking her hand in mine. "You won't lose me, Emily. We'll face this together." Her grip tightened, a silent promise. But healing is rarely a straight path. The truth we uncovered also brought conflict. Emily's wealthy in-laws, once so welcoming, began to question her story as whispers of doubt crept in. The family that had embraced her started to distance themselves, leaving Emily caught between two worlds. I watched her struggle, torn between holding on to the lie that had protected her and facing the reality that truth might set her free or destroy her completely. In those moments, I realized that forgiveness wasn't just about me forgiving her, it was about forgiving herself. And that journey would take time. Together, we began the painstaking process of rebuilding trust brick by brick, conversation by conversation. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, tears, and moments of anger. But with each step, we moved closer to a fragile peace. Because sometimes the most painful stories are also the most human stories of fear, love, betrayal, and ultimately redemption. And as I looked at my daughter, no longer an orphan, but a woman seeking her place in the world, I knew that our story was far from over. It was just beginning. The journey toward rebuilding our fractured relationship was a slow and arduous one. Each day presented a new challenge, a new emotional hurdle to overcome. I learned quickly that love alone was not enough to mend the deep wounds inflicted by years of deception and silence. Patience, understanding, and an unwavering commitment to truth were the pillars that would support us through the storm. Emily and I began to establish new boundaries, not walls, but gentle lines that allowed us to navigate our fragile connection without overwhelming one another. We agreed to be honest even when the truth was uncomfortable or painful, and to listen without judgment. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the city, Emily opened up about the loneliness she had felt growing up. "I was always different," she said quietly. "Not because of who I was, but because of what I wasn't allowed to be. Her words struck a chord deep within me. I realized how much pain she had carried silently, how her lie was less a choice and more a desperate plea to be seen and accepted. Together, we began to explore the reasons behind her fabrications, the societal pressures, the family dynamics, and her own fears of inadequacy. It was a humbling experience, forcing me to confront my own failings as a mother and to understand the complex web of emotions that led Emily down this path. Meanwhile, the impact of Emily's deception rippled through her new family. The revelation strained relationships and ignited heated conversations behind closed doors. Some relatives felt betrayed and angry, while others struggled to reconcile the woman they knew with the stories that had been concealed. Mark, her husband, was caught in the middle, torn between his love for Emily and the expectations of his family. I admired his steadfastness even as I saw the toll the situation took on him. Despite the turmoil, Emily remained resolute. She chose to face the consequences of her actions rather than continue hiding behind lies. It was a courageous decision, one that signaled her readiness to reclaim her truth and rebuild her life authentically. Our conversations deepened, moving beyond the surface to address the emotional scars that had shaped us both. We spoke about forgiveness not as a simple act, but as a process of releasing pain and embracing healing. At times, the weight of the past felt overwhelming, threatening to pull us back into despair. But each time we reminded ourselves why we were fighting for the chance to rewrite our story, not with lies, but with love and honesty. One afternoon, I found myself reflecting on how far we had come. The daughter who once hid behind a fabricated identity was beginning to emerge flawed, but real, scared, but brave. And I, too, was learning to let go of resentment and embrace compassion. Our path was far from perfect. There would be setbacks and challenges ahead. But for the first time in years, I felt a flicker of hope, a belief that even the deepest wounds could heal with time and dedication. Because sometimes the hardest journeys lead to the most profound transformations. And as I watched Emily reclaim her truth, I knew that our story was not defined by betrayal, but by the courage to face it together. As the months unfolded, the fragile truce between Emily and me began to strengthen into something more tangible. What had once been a gulf filled with pain and betrayal was now a narrow bridge, tentative and trembling, yet standing firm enough to cross. The journey was anything but smooth. We were still navigating the rocky terrain of fractured trust and raw emotions, but each step forward, no matter how small, was a victory. Emily's choice to reveal her true past and stop living behind the carefully constructed facade had far-reaching effects. The wealthy family she had married into the one that had accepted her as the orphaned daughter in need of their protection found themselves struggling to reconcile the truth with the image they had cherished. The revelation stirred a complicated mix of shock, confusion, and in some cases, resentment. I witnessed the varying reactions firsthand. Some family members pulled away, their disappointment and sense of betrayal evident. Others surprisingly approached Emily with empathy and understanding, acknowledging the courage it took to finally tell the truth. For them, Emily was not just the sum of her past mistakes, but a woman willing to confront her own pain and rebuild her identity authentically. Mark, Emily's husband, was a pillar of support throughout the ordeal. Despite the tension with his family, his love for Emily remained unwavering. I saw how much strength it took for him to stand by her side, weathering the storm of disapproval and whispered gossip. His steadfastness offered Emily a safe harbor, a reminder that love grounded in truth can survive even the harshest tests. One day, Emily surprised me with an invitation to a family gathering. It was a quiet, unassuming event, an intimate dinner at her in-laws' home. The invitation was more than just a social call, it was a symbolic gesture. By asking me to join, Emily was bridging the gap between the family she left behind and the family she married into. It was a sign she wanted healing not just for herself and me, but for everyone caught in the fallout of her deception. I wasn't sure what to expect. Would I be welcomed, or viewed as the mother whose presence might reopen wounds? The thought unsettled me, but I knew that accepting the invitation was another step forward in our fragile reconciliation. The evening arrived, and I found myself in a room filled with familiar faces and curious eyes. The atmosphere was a blend of polite reserve and tentative warmth. Conversations began cautiously polite questions about life work and well-being, but gradually grew more genuine. Slowly, the walls of discomfort started to crumble. I listened as stories were shared, anecdotes about Emily's childhood, her struggles, and her triumphs. Relatives recounted memories I had never heard, adding new dimensions to the daughter I thought I knew. The family was wrestling with the complexity of truth, forgiveness, and the messy reality of human imperfection. There were moments of awkwardness, to be sure. Some relatives hesitated to look directly at me, unsure how to address the elephant in the room. Others exchanged glances that spoke of their inner conflict. Yet amid the tension, there was also laughter, shared memories, and glimmers of acceptance. As the evening drew to a close, Emily took my hand, squeezing it gently. Her eyes met mine with gratitude and a quiet plea for patience. It was a reminder that this gathering wasn't just about the past, it was about building a future together. Back at home, Emily and I continued our difficult conversations. We delved deeper into the emotional scars left by years of deception and silence. I shared my feelings of hurt, betrayal, and longing for honesty, while she opened up about the fears and insecurities that had driven her to hide the truth. These talks were raw and sometimes painful, but they laid the foundation for rebuilding trust. We made no promises of instant forgiveness or perfect understanding, only a commitment to face our shared past with courage and openness. The process of healing was gradual and nonlinear. Some days progress felt tangible. A laugh shared a memory, revisited a moment of vulnerability. Other days, old wounds resurfaced, triggering tears, frustration, and fear. But through it all, we held on to the hope that love, however bruised, could endure. One afternoon, as we sat together in the garden surrounded by blooming flowers, Emily turned to me with a sincerity that took my breath away. "Thank you for not giving up on me," she said softly. "For believing in me even when I didn't believe in myself." Her words touched the deepest part of me. In that moment, I understood that forgiveness is not a single act, but an ongoing journey, a series of choices to release pain, extend grace, and embrace healing. Our story was far from over. There would be setbacks, moments of doubt, and the lingering shadows of the past. But we had taken the most important step, choosing to face the truth together and rebuild our relationship on a foundation of honesty. Because sometimes the greatest acts of love are found not in grand gestures, but in the courage to be vulnerable, to forgive, and to keep moving forward even when the path is uncertain. And as I looked at my daughter, no longer hiding behind a carefully crafted lie, but standing strong in her truth, I knew that our journey was one of redemption, hope, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her child. After the fragile beginnings of our renewed relationship, Emily and I found ourselves stepping into a new chapter, one marked by difficult conversations, unexpected discoveries, and the slow, sometimes painful process of healing. The lie she had lived for years was finally unraveling, but with that unraveling came the task of rebuilding not only trust between us, but also her sense of identity and belonging. Our conversations became more open, but they were far from easy. Emily would often start by hesitating, words catching in her throat as she struggled to express the fears she'd buried for so long. I learned that beneath her bravado and carefully crafted persona was a young woman desperate for acceptance, terrified of rejection. One evening, as rain pattered softly against the window, Emily confessed, "Mom, I didn't just lie because I wanted to escape. I lied because I thought I was protecting us all from judgment, from pain, from shame." I didn't know how to be honest without losing everything. Her vulnerability hit me like a tidal wave. I reached across the table and took her hands in mine, feeling the tremble in her fingers. Emily, the truth can be scary, but it's also freeing. And you never had to carry this alone. In turn, I shared my own regrets and missteps as a mother, the times I missed signs of her struggles when I was too busy or too proud to see her pain. I admitted my own fears that I might lose her, or that the truth might destroy the fragile relationship we had left. Those conversations, raw and unfiltered, became the foundation of our healing. We cried together, argued, sometimes retreated into silence, but always returned to the table determined to rebuild. One day, Emily surprised me by suggesting we invite her in-laws for dinner at my home. I was hesitant at first, unsure how such a meeting would unfold after everything, but I also saw the courage in her eyes, the desire to bridge the worlds she had torn apart. The dinner was a mixture of cautious politeness and tentative warmth. Her in-laws had questions, some awkward, others heartfelt. They wanted to understand the woman they'd married and the family she came from. Old stories were shared and new ones began to form. There were moments of tension, of course. Some relatives still struggled with feelings of betrayal, unable to reconcile the lie with the person sitting across from them. But amid the discomfort, there was also laughter, genuine connection, and glimpses of acceptance. That evening, as Emily and I cleared the table, she looked at me and said softly, "Thank you for letting me bring them here. It means more than you know." Our relationship wasn't perfect, but it was real. Real enough to take another brave step: family counseling. We began seeing a therapist together, someone who could help us navigate the complex emotions that lingered beneath the surface. Those sessions were eye-opening and often painful. They forced us to confront not just the lie, but the underlying wounds, fears, insecurities, and unspoken resentments. Emily learned to articulate her feelings of abandonment and shame, and I learned to listen without judgment or defensiveness. The therapist guided us in developing tools for communication and rebuilding trust, teaching us how to hold space for one another's pain without letting it consume us. Counseling wasn't a quick fix. There were setbacks and moments when old wounds reopened with fresh intensity. But we both committed to the process, recognizing that healing was a journey, not a destination. Outside our home, the ripple effects of Emily's deception continued to challenge relationships. Some friends distanced themselves, unable to reconcile the new truth with their previous perceptions. Others grew closer, offering support and understanding. Emily's own sense of self began to transform. The weight of carrying a false story slowly lifted, replaced by a fragile but growing confidence in her authentic identity. One afternoon, she brought me a photo album, its pages filled with images from her childhood, some familiar, some new to me. "I want us to remember where we came from," she said quietly, "not to hold on to pain, but to honor our journey." As I flipped through the pictures, the smiles, the milestones, the candid moments, I felt a swell of pride and hope. Despite everything, we were still family, still connected. Our journey was far from over. There would be difficult days ahead, moments of doubt and fear. But together we were learning to face those challenges with honesty, compassion, and courage. Because sometimes the hardest stories don't end neatly or perfectly. They end with the messy, beautiful truth of human imperfection and the unbreakable bonds forged through forgiveness and love. As I looked at my daughter, no longer hiding behind lies but standing strong in her truth, I knew that our story, marked by pain and betrayal, was also a story of hope, resilience, and redemption. In the months that followed Emily's brave decision to finally live her truth, our relationship began to transform in ways I had scarcely dared to hope for. The walls built over years of deception, silence, and hurt started to crumble, replaced by fragile bridges made of honesty, vulnerability, and a fierce determination to heal. The journey was anything but smooth. We stumbled over old wounds and raw emotions. Some days, grief and anger surged like wild storms, threatening to wash away the fragile trust we were rebuilding. Other days, tentative moments of laughter and understanding brought sunlight through the cracks in our broken bond. Emily's truth was more than a confession. It was a reckoning with deep fears that had haunted her for years. She opened up about the loneliness she'd endured as a child, the heavy weight of shame that crushed her spirit, and the desperate desire to belong somewhere, to be loved without conditions. One evening, her voice breaking with emotion, she confessed, "Mom, I lied not because I wanted to hurt anyone. I lied because I was terrified that if people knew the real me, they'd abandon me. I thought if I wasn't perfect, I'd lose everything." Hearing her words shattered something inside me, a mixture of heartbreak and guilt. How had I missed the pain in her eyes? How many silent cries had gone unheard? I began to share my own regrets, my moments of absence and blindness, and the ways my fear had kept me from reaching out when she needed me most. We both knew that words alone wouldn't heal the wounds, so we sought professional help and began attending family therapy together. The sessions were brutal but necessary. We peeled back layers of resentment and sorrow, revealing truths that had been buried under years of silence. The therapist helped us learn how to communicate with kindness, to listen deeply without interrupting or defending. Some sessions ended in tears, others in breakthroughs. We began to see each other not just as mother and daughter, but as flawed human beings trying desperately to connect. Emily learned to express the deep loneliness and vulnerability that had driven her to fabricate her story, and I learned to listen without judgment, recognizing the pain behind her actions. Outside the confines of therapy, Emily faced another daunting challenge, reconciling with her wealthy in-laws. The family that had embraced her as an orphan was now grappling with the truth. She gathered the courage to tell them her story, exposing herself to rejection and judgment. The reactions varied. Some relatives struggled to forgive the deception, feeling deeply betrayed. Others responded with grace and understanding, moved by her honesty and the pain behind her choices. Mark, Emily's husband, stood by her unwaveringly. His steadfast love was a beacon during the stormy days, reminding us all that love rooted in truth could endure even the fiercest challenges. One crisp autumn afternoon, Emily and I revisited the community center where she had once volunteered. The halls echoed with memories of kindness, but also exclusion and loneliness. She spoke quietly about how those experiences fueled her longing to create a new identity, to escape from a past that seemed too painful to face. As we stepped outside into the fading golden light, Emily's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Mom," she said softly, "I want to live without fear, to be loved for who I am, not the mask I wore." Her words pierced my heart. In that moment, I understood that our journey was about much more than uncovering lies. It was about embracing authenticity and learning to love ourselves and each other despite our imperfections. The road ahead remained uncertain. There would be days when the past cast long shadows, when fear and doubt threatened to consume us. But now we face those moments together with honesty, compassion, and an unbreakable bond forged through truth and forgiveness. Because sometimes the most profound healing comes not from forgetting the past, but from meeting it with courage and grace. As I looked at my daughter, no longer hidden behind stories or pretenses, but standing tall in her truth, I felt a surge of hope. Our story, marked by pain and betrayal, was also one of resilience, redemption, and love. I knew the scars we carried would never fully disappear, but they no longer defined us. Instead, they became the roots that held us steady even through the fiercest storms. And as the seasons changed, so did we, growing stronger, closer, and more real. The moment Emily and I reached what felt like the most delicate truths of our lives, I realized that healing isn't a destination. It's a long, winding road that challenges you every step of the way. Just when you think the storm has passed, a gust of wind shakes the branches, reminding you that the roots of pain run deep. But this time, I was ready, and so was she. After months of therapy, shared vulnerability, and hard conversations, Emily and I were no longer strangers living parallel lives with a wall of silence between us. We were mother and daughter, imperfect and bruised, but united by a raw, honest love. Yet the real test was just beginning. Her in-laws, who once accepted her story as truth, were beginning to stir uneasily. The truth Emily revealed about her past did more than shatter illusions. It threatened the foundation of the wealthy family's own carefully curated image. Some recoiled hurt by the deception. Others stood firm in support, rallying around Emily's courage to face her past head-on. Mark, Emily's husband, became the anchor in this turbulent sea. I watched him navigate the backlash with quiet strength, reminding all of us that love forged in truth withstands the harshest storms. But even with his support, Emily felt the sting of being caught between two worlds, the family she was born into and the one she married into. One evening, we gathered for what was meant to be a peaceful dinner with her in-laws. The room buzzed with polite conversation, but beneath the surface simmered tension. Emily's father-in-law, a man known for his stoic demeanor, barely met my eyes. His wife avoided direct conversation, her polite smile barely masking disappointment. Emily sat next to Mark, her fingers gripping his arm tightly. After dinner, as the guests retreated to the living room, the patriarch pulled me aside. His voice low and measured, he said, "Your daughter's story changes everything we thought we knew. But perhaps it's time we saw her as she truly is, not as we wished her to be." His words were heavy, but I sensed a grudging respect beneath the formality. That night, as we drove home, Emily turned to me and whispered, "This isn't just about me anymore. It's about us, all of us, trying to find a place where the truth fits." I nodded, feeling the weight of what lay ahead. Back home, the tension lingered, but so did a fragile hope. Emily and I found solace in small rituals, long walks in the park, cooking together, sharing stories from our past that had nothing to do with lies or betrayal. Each moment was a stitch in the fabric of our renewed relationship. One afternoon, Emily pulled out an old journal she'd kept as a teenager. "I wrote down my fears and dreams," she said, flipping through the worn pages. "I want to show you who I was before the lies took over." Reading her words, I saw a girl desperate to be seen, to be loved, not the perfect orphan she pretended to be, but a real girl who made mistakes, felt pain, and longed for belonging. I shared with her my own journals from years past, revealing my struggles as a mother, the times I felt powerless to protect her, and the deep sorrow I carried for not being able to shield her from pain. Those exchanges deepened our connection, creating a bridge built not just on forgiveness, but on true understanding. But the outside world continued to challenge us. Rumors circulated among friends and acquaintances about Emily's deception. Some whispered behind backs, others confronted us directly, their eyes full of judgment. One day, Emily received a harsh message from an old friend who wrote, "How could you lie about something so fundamental? You're not the person I thought you were." The pain in Emily's eyes that day was unmistakable. But instead of retreating, she chose to respond with honesty. She posted a heartfelt message on social media, admitting her mistakes and asking for forgiveness, not just from friends, but from herself. The response was mixed. Some criticized, but many others praised her bravery. That act of courage became a turning point. Emily's openness began to inspire others who carried their own secrets and burdens. I watched with pride as my daughter transformed from a woman hiding in shadows into one standing boldly in the light. Our family gatherings became less tense, more genuine. The laughter was not forced but earned. The glances exchanged were warmer, less guarded. One Sunday afternoon, Emily invited her father and me to a picnic in the countryside. As we sat on a checkered blanket beneath a sky streaked with clouds, she said, I want us to build new memories, ones that don't carry the weight of the past. I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. That's all I've ever wanted. We talked for hours about dreams, fears, and the uncertain future. I realized then that the lie had not been the end of our story, but the beginning of a new chapter one, where honesty, pain, and love coexisted. Because life isn't about perfection, it's about resilience, about falling, rising, and finding light even in the darkest places. Emily and I had found that light flickering, fragile but real. And as I looked at her, no longer a girl lost in lies, but a woman embracing her truth, I knew the journey was worth every tear, every heartbreak, and every moment of doubt. Our story wasn't over, it was just beginning. The fragile piece Emily and I had painstakingly built was about to be tested in ways I never could have imagined. Just when it seemed like the worst was behind us, a new storm gathered on the horizon, one that threatened to unravel everything we had fought so hard to rebuild. It began with a letter, cold and impersonal, slipped beneath my front door one rainy morning. My fingers trembled as I picked it up, the heavy weight of dread settling in my chest before I even unfolded the paper. The letter was a legal notice, a challenge to Emily's inheritance rights, sent anonymously but unmistakably from her in-laws. They claimed that her deception about her past nullified any claim she might have to the family's estate. The words were carefully crafted, precise and ruthless. For a moment the world seemed to tilt beneath me. How could they use her past, the lie she had already paid dearly for, as a weapon against her? I thought of all we had endured, the tears, the confessions, the therapy sessions, the painstaking process of rebuilding trust. And now this. The fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. I found Emily in the living room, clutching the letter like a lifeline, her eyes wide and brimming with shock. "Mom," she said in a voice barely above a whisper, "they're trying to take everything away from me." That night, silence engulfed our home. It was the kind of silence heavy with fear and uncertainty, where every unspoken thought felt like a brick pressing down on our chests. We sat together, not needing words to understand the magnitude of the battle ahead. In the following days, the legal challenge became a suffocating presence in our lives. Attorneys, court dates, piles of paperwork, they consumed our every waking moment. The press caught wind of the story, transforming our private anguish into public spectacle. Headlines splashed across news sites with cruel efficiency: daughter's lies, threaten family fortune inheritance, dispute rocks, prestigious family truth and lies, clash in bitter battle. Every headline felt like salt poured into a fresh wound. Strangers judged us, whispers followed us, and friends grew distant, unsure how to reconcile the messy reality with their own perceptions. But amidst the chaos, Emily's resolve only grew stronger. The timid girl who once hid behind lies was now a woman fighting fiercely for her dignity. One afternoon, as we prepared for a critical court hearing, Emily looked at me with eyes ablaze with determination. "This isn't just about money or property," she said quietly but firmly. "It's about proving that my past mistakes don't define me, that I am more than the lie I once told." The courtroom was a cold, unforgiving arena. Lawyers argued with sharp words and pointed questions, dissecting every detail of Emily's life. Witnesses testified, some sympathetic, others harsh and unforgiving. We sat side by side, drawing strength from each other as the past was dragged into the harsh light of day. Every moment was a test of our endurance. I watched Emily face the scrutiny with courage I could scarcely believe. Her voice never wavered, her honesty cutting through the tension like a beacon. When the judge finally announced that the verdict would be delayed, a dark cloud settled over us. The waiting was agonizing each day, stretching endlessly as we awaited a decision that would determine our future. In the quiet moments between court dates, we clung to each other. Our bond, forged in the crucible of shared pain, became an unbreakable lifeline. Emily would sometimes confide her fears, the haunting doubt that maybe the truth wasn't enough. But I reminded her that she had already won the greater battle, the battle for her own soul. Then finally, the day of the verdict arrived. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with anticipation. Everyone held their breath as the judge began to speak. "We acknowledge the deception that occurred," he said solemnly, "but also recognize the petitioner's sincere remorse and the efforts made toward reconciliation and honesty." The words were measured but clear. In light of these factors, the court rules in favor of the petitioner, affirming her inheritance rights and rejecting the challenge. Tears streamed down Emily's face as relief flooded through her. Years of pain and struggle seemed to lift in that moment. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements, but Emily's focus was on something deeper, on reclaiming her life and forging a future untethered from past mistakes. In the weeks that followed, the battle slowly receded from public view. Emily reached out to her in-laws, hoping to bridge the gaps left by hurt and betrayal. Some doors remained closed, locked tight by resentment, but others creaked open, warmed by time and genuine remorse. We planned a family gathering, not a grand event, but a simple celebration of survival and new beginnings. The air was still tinged with tension, but there was also laughter, shared stories, and moments of real connection. I watched Emily move through the crowd, her smile no longer forced but genuine. She was no longer the girl hiding behind a fabricated story, but a woman who had faced the darkness and come through stronger. Our journey had been marked by lies, pain, and betrayal, but also by courage, truth, and the indomitable strength of family. Because in the end, it's not the past that defines us, but how we choose to rise from it. Together we rose. The sun was dipping below the horizon, casting long golden hues over the quiet neighborhood where I had lived for decades. It felt surreal, as if the very light itself was signaling an end and a beginning all at once. This story, my story, had come so far from the tangled web of lies, betrayal, and heartbreak that once consumed every moment of my life. Now, as I stood at the edge of this new chapter, I understood something profound. Healing is never linear, never neat. It is raw, unpredictable, and beautiful in its imperfection. When Emily first lied about being an orphan to escape the crushing weight of her past and seek belonging in a family she dreamed of, I was devastated. The trust between us fractured in ways I feared might never heal. But beneath that lie was a girl, terrified, isolated, desperate to be seen. And beneath my initial anger was a mother who longed for nothing more than to protect her child, even when she didn't understand her choices. Over the years, we fought battles with each other, with ourselves, and with a world that was quick to judge. Therapy sessions were some of the hardest days of my life, but they also became the crucible where we forged a new bond. One built not on illusion, but on brutal honesty and fragile hope. Winning the legal battle for Emily's inheritance was only a milestone, not a destination. The scars left by deceit don't simply fade, they become part of your history, shaping who you are. Our family, too, was forever altered, some relationships fractured beyond repair, others slowly mended by time and grace. In the quiet moments sitting with Emily on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of fire and hope, I realized that the greatest victory was not in the court's ruling, but in our ability to forgive not just each other, but ourselves. Forgiveness, I learned, was not forgetting or excusing what happened. It was choosing to free our hearts from the poison of resentment. It was a decision to open the door to healing, no matter how fragile or slow that journey might be. We built new rituals, simple acts of kindness and understanding that became the mortar of our rebuilt relationship. Cooking meals together, sharing stories from before the lies, laughing at memories once forgotten. Every day was a small victory over the past. Yet the hardest moments often came in solitude, when doubt whispered cruel lies and fear tried to pull us back into old patterns. But we held fast, reminding each other that growth is born from discomfort and that true strength lies in vulnerability. Emily blossomed into a woman unafraid to face her truth, to stand in the light of her imperfections. She became an advocate for others burdened by secrets, using her story to inspire and empower. Watching her rise was the most profound gift I could have ever received. Our family circle grew not perfect, but genuine. The in-laws who once recoiled began to see Emily's strength. Friends who had turned away returned, humbled by the honesty we now lived by. And me, I found a new purpose to share this story, to remind others that beneath every broken family, every painful secret, lies the possibility of redemption and love. After the courtroom battle, Emily and I found ourselves in a quiet, strange limbo. The noise of judgment from others faded, but the echoes inside our own hearts remained. The truth had set us free legally, but emotionally, freedom was still elusive. There were mornings when I woke feeling raw, the weight of years pressing down on my chest. I questioned if the sacrifices we made had been enough, if the wounds could truly heal. But then Emily would call me with a small victory, a friend reaching out to apologize, a smile shared without hesitation, a moment of laughter unguarded by fear. We learned that healing is not a destination, but a journey full of setbacks and breakthroughs. It was in the small, mundane moments where the greatest transformation happened, in cooking meals side by side, in the comfortable silences that no longer felt like punishment, in the shared glances that spoke volumes without a single word. I started to understand my own role differently, not as a perfect mother or judge of right and wrong, but as a fellow traveler on this winding path. I learned to hold space for Emily's pain and triumph without trying to fix or control it. I found humility in admitting my own mistakes and strength in vulnerability. One afternoon, Emily and I sat together in the garden, the sunlight filtering softly through the leaves. She reached out, took my hand, and said, "Mom, I want you to know I'm grateful. Not just for standing by me, but for seeing me, really seeing me." Tears welled up in my eyes. It was the most honest and tender moment we'd shared in years. In that instant, I realized that love, flawed, messy, but steadfast, was what had carried us through. Our family gatherings gradually shifted tone. Some relatives remained distant, their silence a reminder of the damage done. But others approached with tentative warmth, eager to rebuild what was broken. The in-laws who had once challenged Emily's place began to soften, moved by her resilience and honesty. Mark, always steady and unwavering, became a pillar not just for Emily, but for all of us. Watching their partnership grow, forged through fire and truth, gave me hope that love could triumph over even the deepest wounds. Yet even amidst progress, shadows lingered. Old fears would sometimes resurface, threatening to undo the fragile peace. But we faced them together, refusing to let the past dictate our future. I found solace in writing, putting pen to paper to capture the swirling emotions inside me. The act of storytelling became healing, a way to make sense of chaos and find meaning in suffering. Through this channel, I share our story, not to dwell on pain, but to illuminate the path toward redemption. To remind anyone watching that they are not alone, and that even in the darkest times, light can be found. As the seasons changed, so did we. Emily grew more confident, more grounded in her truth. I grew more patient, more forgiving, not just of her, but of myself. Our bond transformed from fractured to unbreakable, a testament to the power of love and resilience. In quiet moments, I catch myself marveling at how far we've come, from desperate lies to courageous honesty, from isolation to connection. And while the scars remain, they no longer define us. Instead, they tell a story of survival, growth, and the enduring strength of family. If you're watching and feeling overwhelmed by your own struggles, know this healing is possible. It takes time, courage, and sometimes the willingness to face uncomfortable truths. But on the other side lies freedom, freedom to live authentically, to love deeply, and to embrace life fully. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If our story resonates, please share your own experiences in the comments below. Your voice matters, and together we can create a community rooted in compassion and understanding. Please like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories that explore the complexities of family truth and forgiveness. Because sometimes the greatest triumph isn't revenge, it's the choice to rise, heal, and love despite everything.